Schultz. They could not make it as because of other commitments. Councillor Bauer, do you have anything for the agenda?
I have nothing to add, Your Worship.
Councillor Montgomery?
If I could just ask admin, James, was that admin inquiry going to be tonight?
Yeah, we have a list of inquiries.
Okay. Okay, well then it'll be included in there.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Councillor Cox?
I have nothing, Your Worship.
Councillor Corbeil?
I have nothing, Your Worship.
And I have one in-camera land item, Deborah, if you could make a note of that. One land issue for the in-camera session. So I'm looking for the adoption of the agenda as amended. Councillor Cox?
I so move, Your Worship.
Thank you. You've heard the motion from Councillor Cox. All in favor? And the agenda is approved as amended. Item 4, delegations. We have Mr. John Godsman. If you would please come forward and join us at the podium to talk about the latest installment of Remembering Our Roots. Welcome, Mr. Godsman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Town Councillors. I'd just like to give you a very brief background on this project. In May 2010 is when I started writing the articles. And the articles are biographies of the seniors of Strathmore and Wheatland County. I didn't expect to be still writing articles 7 years later. This has been a project which has gone beyond my means. This year I was nominated to receive the Alberta Senior Service Award. There were 84 nominees. Only the top 8 get the award. I was 9th or higher. But it was a great honour. I have written 3 books. Volume 1 came out in June 2013. Volume 2 came out in June 2015. Volume 3 came out this month. It gives me great pleasure to present to Council Volume 3 as a thank you for your gracious contribution and sponsorship of my books. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Godsman. And could we all maybe come forward and have a photo with Mr. Godsman? Well, let's just take a photo in front here, John.
Great.
Thank you very much. And there will be health permitting for Volume 4.
Awesome.
In 2 years' time.
That's great news.
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
On behalf of Council and the town of Strathmore, I'd like to thank John Godsman for his work in keeping alive the history of the town and recognizing some of the many couples who have come through and lived here for many, many years. Thank you for all your efforts to bring their stories to us. Thank you again.
Excuse me, I went back to the night market at the golf.
You bet. Have a good evening and thanks again. Item 4.2, Strathmore Tim Hortons, if you'd like to come forward and talk to us.
Hi, Mayor and Council. I'm Kevin Corpy, restaurant owner here in town, my wife Tracy. We're here to present a check to Council for FCSS, which is the our charity for Tim Horton restaurants in the area for Smile Cookie Week. So every year in September for a week, Tim Horton restaurant owners across Canada take chocolate chunk cookies, decorate them with a smile, and sell them for $1. And the entire $1 is donated to a local charity. So all 3 restaurants in town got together this year, and we've chosen FCSS as our local charity. So we're here to donate the check for the proceeds.
The big check and the little check.
Thank you very much. And I know that the FCSS would really appreciate this, and we're grateful for it. They do great work in the town to help people in the social service area and help support them in their needs. So thank you for choosing them as your charity.
Well, for sure.
And we'll get if you're okay, we'll get a picture taken.
Of course, for sure.
That's what the big check is for.
Tracy's not here. Is someone coming up from administration?
Directors. Deputy in the department.
It's fire department.
Oh, that's a lot of cookies. That's crazy. It's a ton of cookies. Okay.
Sure.
Oops, you were to the boss.
That's okay, everybody smile. Take a few, and then if your eyes are closed, it'll work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, I'll let you keep that too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for supporting us. It's really nice to meet you.
Thank you
And
so
Merry
much.
Christmas. Thank you
You guys
for
are
doing this
wonderful.
for us.
Hi, Kevin.
Thank
you very
Really
much.
appreciate it. This is Trent West. Thank you so much.
Yes, it's gonna be good.
Thank you.
It's all good. That's okay.
All right.
And I'm sure some of you want some. 65 degrees. 68. Yeah. Oh, yeah, 65. Yeah, the people from the shell, they were not transposed. We were the only ones in the office.
That's great. Well, thank you for designating our PFC. That will be good work.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice meeting you. Once again, on behalf of the town of Strathmore, we'd like to thank the three Tim Hortons restaurants for their donation, their very generous donation to Strathmore FCSS. And I'm sure that group will use the money very wisely, as they always do. So thank you again for your support, and Merry Christmas. And that brings us to item 5 and 5.1, the minutes of the December 6, 2017 regular council meeting. So if you've read your minutes, I'll be looking for a motion to accept them. Councillor Montgomery?
I will move that we accept the minutes from the previous December 6th regular council meeting.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? The motion is passed unanimously. We have no tabled items, item 6, which brings us to item 7.1. Items from administration, item 7.1, the 2018 long-term financial plan. And our head of financial services, Mr. Teedy, will come forward and talk to us, Mel. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Your Worship. 1 year ago, administration brought forward a long-term financial plan, which was adopted as a blueprint for moving the town of Strathmore ahead towards a more sustainable financial future. During the intervening year, this plan has been reviewed, and we are presenting to council a strengthened long-term financial plan that identifies areas that were not previously identified, such as off-site levies. With the revised MGA, some projects that previously did not qualify for off-site levies are now allowable. One of the goals of the plan is to move the town down a path of financial self-reliance. The town is reliant on funding from the province of Alberta for some operating funding and a major portion of the capital program. It is expected that the province in time will reduce the MSI program. Some of the specific things that we've identified within the plan are as follows. The trend of reducing taxation coupled with increasing expenses are not financially sustainable over a long period of time. As background, the mill rate in 2017 was 8.130, which was 3.5% less than the 2014 mill rate of 8.431. The average residential homeowner paid $90 less in taxes in 2017 than in 2014. Not financially sustainable when costs have gone up by over 3.5% as measured by Statistics Canada for the Calgary area. New program and service requests. It is proposed that all new programs and service requests be accompanied by a source of funding and preferably other than through taxation. This will reduce the continuing need to increase taxation. Another way to describe this would be user pay. Review of programs and service delivery models. Management continually review on an ongoing basis existing programs and services for relevancy to the community and if the program is meeting expectations of the stakeholders in the community. The review will also focus on best practices and if the service is being provided in an efficient and cost-effective manner. Commercial and residential municipal tax rate. Strathmore has the lowest differential between the residential and commercial tax rates compared to surrounding communities. The differential is 15%. In High River, the differential is 23%, Okotoks 40%, Cochrane 42%, Chestermere 44%, Brooks 56%, Airdrie 94%, and Wheatland County 117%. The province of Alberta, for education requisition, applies a 47% premium on non-residential assessments over residential assessments. The recommendation is to increase the percentage non-residential differential to the median point over a 5-year time period. The median point being a premium of approximately 51% non-residential over the residential taxes. Utility rates. It's proposed that utility rates be reviewed annually and a model of full cost recovery be implemented, and the use of MSI or similar grants not be used for utility projects. Utilities should be funded, and utility projects should be funded by fees and or borrowing, and should be self-sustaining. Franchise fees. It's proposed that the franchise fees be adjusted as allowed by the provincial regulations. Recreation fees. It's proposed that recreation fees be established on the concept of full cost recovery for adult programs, 75% cost recovery for senior programs, 50% cost recovery for youth and disabled. It's proposed that recreation fees be reviewed against the fees of other municipalities and adjusted to be competitive. Infrastructure Reinvestment Reserve. It's proposed that the town contribute to the Infrastructure Reinvestment Reserve at a rate of no less than 1% of net municipal revenue annually, with the goal of having an amount equal to 25% of the infrastructure deficit over a period of 15 years. The goal is approximately $10 million in 15 years down the road. Completion of master plans. It's proposed that master plans be completed as rapidly as possible in order to accommodate the implementation of the new offsite levy possibility. It's also proposed that we engage Wheatland County in a meaningful discussion on joint services funding model subsequent to the recreation master plan being completed. Those are just some of the items contained within the long-term financial plan. And that concludes my comments, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Teedy. Questions? Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, so I have a few questions. So I guess the first one would be, can I get clarification on what exactly you mean by a premium on non-residential assessments?
Yes. In 2017, the residential mill rate was 5.532. The non-residential mill rate was 6.376. So the non-residential mill rate is 15% higher than the residential mill rate. And in the long-term financial plan, we've identified the percentages that pertain to each of the communities, such as High River, Okotoks, Cochrane, Brooks, and Airdrie, and Wheatland County.
So like where you stated that like currently we're at a 47% premium and you want to move to a 51% premium?
No, currently we're at 15%.
Um,
The
Right, so
province-
yeah, so I'm just asking for clarification, like, I guess if you could explain to me, because I don't know, like, what does it mean when it says that applies a 47% premium on non-residential assessments? And then it says the recommendation is to increase the percent. So what exactly does that mean when you say they apply a premium?
When the province sends us a requisition, which is annually, they apply within that requisition calculation a 47% premium on their amount that they requisition on the mill rate. They do a calculation and they apply that differential within their calculation on the education portion of the requisition.
Okay, and moving to 51% would affect it how for us?
We would be mirroring closer that same percentage. And 51% is the median of the difference between the 15% and the 117% that Wheatland County is at.
Oh, I see, okay. Okay, all right. Okay, and I just want to make a comment with regards to franchise fees, and that is that as much as I appreciate that we are able to essentially tax institutions that we aren't able to kind of tax through property taxes, I think we should at the same time remember that that the tax that will be borne largely by the kind of the general taxpayer, and so we should be careful, I guess, about increasing rates to the maximum of what we can simply because we can, because it is essentially going to be paid by the same taxpayers who are going to be feeling our other tax increases. And then something else I wanted to bring up as well was I feel that we should be increasing the cost recovery for seniors to 100% for user fees. And I would even like to see a cost recovery for the disabled increase to 75%. And I looked at some of the numbers from the users of the Aquatic Center, for instance, and I noticed that in the last few years, there was basically, I think this year there was about 9 seniors that had purchased a year pass, and then prior to that there was like very small numbers, and then for disabled there was almost none as well. But for the seniors especially, I think I would like to look at increasing the user fee recovery to 100%. And then I wanted to also, if I could bring up on page 12/29, where you meant, like, where you recommend that the town contribute to the infrastructure reinvestment reserve at a rate of no less than 1%, with the goal of having an amount equal to 25% within 15 years. So you're only referring to 25% of kind of today's infrastructure deficit, because obviously, like, in 15 years, the deficit will be closer to 100 million, which obviously 25% would be 25 million. And so I did some rough math, I guess, and so to even get up to the 10 million, because like we have 6 million, correct? And so we need to get basically another 4 million to get to that 10 million, is that correct?
No, the 6 million is capital reserves,
Yeah.
but that's already set aside for specific projects.
So we want to get 10 million over and above that 6 million?
Correct.
Okay. So we would be looking at having to put in quite a bit more, like probably closer to 3% or 4%, would we, to get to that amount?
It would be a much higher number, yes.
Yeah, okay. Do you know roughly like what the actual dollar amount is that we should be setting aside, rather than a percentage of our, like, if you could pick a number, do you know like what you would pick?
I do not have a specific number in mind, other than this is a first step.
Okay. And could you correct me if I'm wrong, I guess? Does some of our reserve come from, let's say, dividends of our investments? Is that correct?
Yes, interest is added on to all of our reserve balances from our investment income annually.
Okay. And so is a portion of that going to be allocated to this particular infrastructure reserve?
We would maintain the same process of adding on interest that we receive on our investment portfolio back to the reserves.
Okay. Would we, have you given us anything that shows us how much we get from, like, that goes towards various reserves from our investments?
And no, I have not shared that number
Okay.
with council.
Okay.
But I can if you'd like.
I would appreciate, just for kind of general knowledge, if we could access that.
I don't think it's a huge amount. Like, they can't go in like big.
Worship.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Thackeray, would you like to add something?
Yes, if I may, through the chair, just to clarify, and this may help Councillor Montgomery, our intention is to at least establish what a ground floor would be to start putting money away, simply because we cannot rely on other levels of government to pay for what is substantially our capital works program as a major source of funding. Other provinces, the funding is drying up or is gone. Our province is going through economic times, and we're sensitive to that, and we would like to take a long-term approach and recommendation to council to start building some of our funds and not making it onerous on anybody as much as we possibly can, but we have a lot of facility and bricks and mortar that we believe would be beneficial for us to have some money aside. So we're able to draw on a combination of grants, should they become available, debt, partnerships, own source revenues, even the potential to borrow from ourselves if it becomes a possibility, because some other cities have done that, and it's set them up in a very positive position. And so I think that would, if we take a long play approach, we believe this at least would start us on that path. Is that a fair?
Yes.
That's our intention.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate that. I guess I'm coming at it from probably the same perspective, which is I want to ensure that we are setting aside enough, and that we're not even, we're not kind of holding back as far as what our needs are.
We can always do more.
Okay, well, like, one of the questions I was going to ask was with regards to when we vote on our budget options, if we should even perhaps look at allocating slightly more than what we've kind of talked about for the reserves. But that's something I guess we could discuss later. And so that's the end of my questions, though. But so thank you very much, Mel.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Cox was next.
Hi, Mel.
Good evening.
I like that we're going down this road to increase it to 51%. I'd like to get there. But with what we've set out as our two options, and the lower of the two options as far as commercial goes, because the residential is the same for both options, how much is that going to get us closer to that 51%?
only a small portion.
like a very, very small portion. So how are we going to get there in 5 years? That's what concerns me.
We would have to be doing larger increases in years 2 to 5 than what is in front of us currently.
Mr. Thackeray, did you want to address that?
If I may, through the chair, one of the, Mel, if I'm not mistaken, though, if council's amenable to a 5-year approach to this, we could effectively replace our reliance on MSI within that 5 years if we stick to this plan for 5 years across the board. Is that
It would be a major step
Yeah.
towards that, yes.
Okay, Councillor Cox, did you
Yeah,
want to?
just though, what I'm seeing though, is if we're only increasing commercial by 1% higher than our residential, we're not actually making a whole leap on that split this year.
It's a through the chair, it would be a gradual increase. Council's discretion is to speed that increase up, for sure.
But if we do 1% this year, so, I mean, we're talking, has to be a 5% difference next year, 5%, we're still a long ways away from 51%.
I think we would, what do you think, Mel?
We,
If you put an additional percent a year, the compounding
Yeah.
will get us there. Is that-
Percent a year.
1 to 2%?
Not if we're increasing the residential.
if we move to a 50% non-residential premium, the mill rate would be in the area of 8, 5 versus 8. And so 1% is a very small,
Yeah.
it's 1 out of 50.
If I could follow up on Councillor Cox's comment and question, my worry is in us trying to move to this 50%, we're obviously we've got to raise the non-residential quite a bit, and we're really, my concern is with the economy the way that is, are we in danger of hurting the commercial even more because they've got carbon tax, they've got the minimum wage that they're facing, and then now we're trying to add this because we've given ourselves this 5-year period. I am a little concerned about the hit to commercial taxes that they pay.
Well, for this year, it's quite a bit smaller than what it would be in years 2 to 5 to go to the 50% premium.
Can I
We're
also-
at 15, so we need to move 35% more.
Councillor Cox.
So I just want to make a point that we understand as well, that when it says non-residential, it means the buildings, not necessarily the businesses that are operating within those buildings.
So if they're building
So-
owners as well as running the commerce.
That's right.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up with a question to Mr. Thackeray. If we decide to accept this plan, is it a written in stone one, or is it more of a living document that can be adjusted? If we find that 5 years is a pretty heavy thing for commercial or non-residential, can we revisit that?
Yes, through the chair, absolutely, it's intended to be a living document. It's a key pillar of a strategic plan, and it's meant to be reviewed, tweaked, adjusted based on the discretion of council, because it is your document at the end of the day. But we believe it's sound, and it would be a significant leap forward for the corporation of the town of Strathmore by adopting this new plan and by sticking to the new proposals in it, I think. That's a...
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are you finished? Oh, Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mel, I just want to say that being a new councillor, this whole budget process has been completely overwhelming, but you have made it digestible for us, and you have gone through a report for the long-term financial plan that I can understand. And so I really want to thank you and your team for doing that, first
you.
off. Thank you. What I would like to say is, there's a couple things in this document that I'm really impressed with and would really support your recommendations. I also was very happy to see that you would like council to instruct administration to prepare a plan to engage Wheatland County in discussions on a joint services funding model. I think that's really key. I think it's really invaluable to us to join our partners and to ask them to help us with a recreation master plan. I would not, unfortunately, support my councillor in upping the increases for cost recovery for the senior programs and the youth programs. So if there is a little bit of dissension in that, are we able to look at that? Or is, like Councillor or Mayor Fuel just said, this is a working document?
It is a working document, and certainly all commentary would be considered, and at the end of the day, it's council's choice what path we go down in terms of what the policies are that get enacted and implemented.
And really, I just thank you for presenting this in such an easy to understand and read way. That's
Thank you.
everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cox?
Sorry, Mel, I'm going to beat this till a dead horse.
No problem.
So again, in order to get us from this 15% to this 51%, we do these increases, option A or option B or option E, we still, let's say for the next 4 years, we aren't going to be able to increase those residentials again.
Sorry?
Like, so if we go with one of these
Yes.
options,
Yes.
next year,
Yes.
when we have to increase the non-residential again in order
Yes.
to meet this expectation,
Yes.
my understanding would be that we have to pretty much leave residential alone again and increase the non-residential a little bit more again.
It would be anticipated that the non-residential would go up at a greater rate, absolutely greater rate. So the difference between the 15% that we are at currently and the 50% we'd like to get to is 35 points. Divide that by 4 years, and you're 8-point-some% per year increase.
Right.
If council adopts the principle of moving to a 50% premium.
So, but then this year, we're only decreasing it by 1%
We are,
if we go with option B.
yes.
So we're kind of
But-
missing
but council-
6%.
Council could come back and instruct us to go to 8% or whatever number council would like to see.
Okay, thank you, Mel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery?
I guess, would you mind explaining, just for my own knowledge, what the, I guess how you picked, this 51%, over and above just kind of looking at, the communities surround, like, was that based on, what you think the community can bear tax-wise, or like economic projections or anything like that? Because I don't know if we should necessarily be just kind of picking a number out of, what seems like kind of a random hat to me, and then just kind of building our tax policy based on that. So is there more to that 51% than just kind of looking at a middle point between the surrounding communities?
That was one of the chief areas that we looked at. And the second part was that currently and as we've talked about in the past, we've used significant amount of reserves over the last several years to balance the town budget. And this year is no exception. And unless we move tax revenue ahead, we will eventually run out of reserves that we can use to balance our budget. So in part, it's needed in order to achieve balanced budgets.
Like, am I missing something? Because I don't quite see how increasing the split between residential and non-residential will necessarily, I think if we just kind of raise taxes across the board, we're going to get there. I don't see how kind of increasing the split will kind of get us there faster necessarily. Like when we get there faster, if we raised residential rates.
Go ahead.
Mr. Thackeray?
If I may, through the chair, I think, Councillor, what you're asking is, what is the basis of the ratio between residential and non-residential property tax differential? Is that what you're saying? And what's the path, and what's the basis and foundation of why we're proposing the 51? Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. What's so important about increasing the split rather than just increasing the overall amount we take from everybody?
So the province, historically, one of the reasons why we use the province as a benchmark is because they base their experience and I guess you call it the best practice on the non-residential versus the residential, because non-residential tends to be revenue generating, and their values tend to be higher values than than a house. A house doesn't generate money, and often there's always variables in this, and there's never a perfect fit. But it certainly is sensitive to the fact that there are many people who a senior, and that person can live in a very highly assessed property. So there's so many. It's very gray, but it's just an attempt to try and put some edges around how to deal with this. And this is the practice of the assessment taxation model for local governments, certainly in Western Canada. I know in the cases of the counties, their ratios are significantly higher than ours by a long shot, because they are taking revenue from different non-residential industries. And there's a plethora from oil and gas to manufacturing to light commercial to retail, sort of a soup to nuts. So that's kind of, I'm just giving a really high-level summary of it, but it's our way of generating sufficient revenues to pay for the services that we pay for. And often in cases where there is, for example, a heavy industry, something that's like a major industry, they often have a significant impact on infrastructure. So they're just paying their part of the cost of the cost of infrastructure, and there's no other source to fund it. For example, roads, there's no toll roads, there's no other source to fund a road. So tractor trailers are much more, have a bigger impact on roads than light cars do. It's just a part of the business. So, and there's a cost to running it. We get a little bit of the gas tax money from the feds, but overall it's a token amount across Canada. And I know FCM has been lobbying heavily at the federal government to get other revenue tools, not to burden the taxpayer with yet more taxes, because there's only one taxpayer. But the reality is the local government provides probably more services and hard services than other levels of government do, and yet they have the least number of revenue tools available to them. And hence there's a big deficit across the country in infrastructure. And it just is. And there's no simple solutions.
Councillor Montgomery?
So, like, am I guess, understanding you correctly that you're saying that businesses are, it's more, let's say, more of a progressive tax to tax businesses more than it would be to increase taxes on residents?
That's I guess it's a hard question. We have the tax regime that we have through the Municipal Government Act. Unfortunately, in this country, we tax assets rather than taxing, like we tax wealth, so to speak, rather than taxing income. Other places, they tax income. Other cities, they have sales taxes. They have different ways of generating revenue. This is how we do that. I don't necessarily agree with it. It's not the best way, but it is what we have. And it's not the best system, but it is what we have. So we do the best we can, and as you say, it could be progressive, but I don't necessarily agree with it, but it's what it is.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I would just echo what Mayor Fuel said, and that is that our businesses are, like some of them are struggling already, and they're dealing with, kind of extra pressure being put on from all directions, and
Very sensitive to that.
yeah, and so, yeah, I think as much as we need to be sensitive to the residents, I think we should be sensitive to the businesses as well. And I appreciate you kind of explaining the importance of the premium, and so that definitely helps. Thank you.
If I may, we're trying to strike a balance as best we can, but we know there's no perfect answer. We're just trying to strike what we think is a balance. We're completely open to any suggestions that you have, and it is entirely at your discretion.
If I could add to Councillor Montgomery and Councillor Cox's comments, and this is a question to Mel, what concerns me about this document, this part of the document, is it seems like if I was a business owner, I would come away saying, I'm locked into some pretty good increases for the next 5 years. Like it's a projection of this is what's going to happen to my business over the next 5 years. And my worry is this going to impact the business climate here in this town because of the things that they're facing, like the carbon tax and the minimum wage payments. So my question is, could we follow this format or maybe adjust this plan in this part to extend that time period, give us a little more time to reach that 50% differential? What would be some of the negatives? I know it's a longer time, you're putting away money in a savings account, but would this be very detrimental to us to try to extend this time period to get closer to that ratio?
Well, what we have in front of us today is just a 1%. And then within the document is a living document, and yes, it can be adjusted to a length of time that council is comfortable with. It's not
Okay.
written in stone that we're going to achieve it in 5 years. It might be 8 years, it might be 6 years.
I guess my concern, Mel, is we're in public and everything, and I'm concerned about the message we're sending out to business in our town, to non-residential taxpayers, that you're looking for, in the next 5 years, it's going to be pretty onerous. And I'm a little worried about the time frame. Mr. Thackeray.
And I can understand, and I hear that, and that's why we took a 5-year window on this rather than doing it a 2-year window. We believe the increases are what they are. We're in a situation that Mel and I feel important for council to consider to set us up for a long-term financial play that we can sustain, because if we keep going the way we're going, the 1-to-1 tax ratio hasn't made us any more or less competitive to our other municipalities. Chestermere, Airdrie, other places with higher costs, they're still attracting significant employers and business. Calgary was a busy place. Right now, there's a lot changing in the economy in Calgary. Oil and gas is suffering. There's a lot of new industries coming in. We don't know what the future will hold, and I don't want to speculate what that will be. What I can say, I think comfortably for council, is we really would recommend that you consider these policy positions that we presented. We believe they're sound. We believe they're not onerous. Some people will disagree with that, and I completely empathize and respect that other people will disagree with it. But we think we have to start somewhere, and from our perspective, this is a significant change for our organization, and it certainly at least establishes a way to deal with it. Yes, it can be adjusted every year, but we think if council does stick to this, and we do the other policy proposals in this, the combination of all these little things will make a difference to our bottom line. We also are very serious to find any savings, and any savings we find internally, we expect those dollars to be reinvested in our existing programs and invest in reserves. So there's an incentive for us both to be as efficient as we can, have a balanced approach, have sound management, financial management tools, and start building our reserves. As Mel said, our surplus, we've been whittling away surplus. Our reserves have stayed kind of constant and flat. We haven't put any money in reserves of any substance, and in fact, we've been using reserves in some cases. We've been using surplus, which is fair because surplus is really prior year's taxation, so the money is going as intended. But eventually that balance sheet surplus will disappear if we keep going on the way we're going, because we're not, as Mel said, we're not putting money away, we're spending money. Nothing wrong with that. It's just we won't have as much money to spend in time because we're adding more infrastructure. This council is interested in adding some major infrastructure over time. We're looking seriously at a recreation facilities plan, including ice. Those are big dollars. We need real money to work with those things. We believe we can, and we believe if we take a 5-year window, I think we can get there. And it won't be, we don't think it'll be too difficult, but I'm not here to judge how somebody feels, because somebody's gonna come in and say, you know what, my taxes hurt. Hey, that's valid, and I respect that, but I can't judge them. I don't know this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cox?
So I just want to get clear again. The word business doesn't
Yep.
apply here. It's
understand.
non-residential. And going by option B, we will only be increasing that 15% to 16% this year. That's,
No.
yeah, because we're still increasing the residential. There's only 1% difference, which is only going to be create a 1% difference in overall as well, right?
It's a very small step.
I guess
Right.
my comment as far as business, and I realize I probably used the wrong term, but at some point, somebody owns the building. So for example, if you have a big grocery store, you might also be the owner of that building. So that's the one that's going to be impacted by this. I totally understand your long-term plan. I'm just a little worried we're trying to do it too fast and that it might be difficult. The other thing I was going to ask you, Mel, tied into what Councillor Cox was saying is that, and what you guys were just saying as far as reserves, would you ever put something in a long-term financial plan like this that talks about reserves not to be used for balancing budgets on a year-to-year basis? Is that too strong a thing to put into a document like this to guide future councils?
I think you always want to have that flexibility to be able to use reserves. Many motions come before council, and we draw on those reserves to fund projects or initiatives after the budget. So to tie your hands and say not to use reserves, I don't believe would be workable.
Okay, thank you. I like a lot of the report, and I'm just concerned about this part as far as the length of time. Maybe we could talk or quickly talk about the length of time that we're looking at adding into this long-term plan. Councillor Cox?
I just had one more comment just for Jason, just for a point of view as to how to make the commercial or the non-residential much more higher. We can go back to last council meeting when we talked about priorities for snow removal. Who has priority for snow removal? Businesses, not residents, businesses. There's one example of why maybe they should pay a little bit higher. That's just my,
So you're saying they get more for their buck, basically. They're getting more bang for their buck. Councillor Montgomery. Sorry, I'm sorry.
You can go. I'd like to.
Yeah, I can totally appreciate that point. But, you know, I'll use like a grocery store, for example. The grocery store might be assessed at $4.5 million. And so instead of seeing a $200 increase this year, they'll see a $3,000 increase. And they're already paying, you know, $30,000 a year in taxes. So it's not just, they're not going to see the same $200 increase that the homeowner will see.
zeros are just zeros.
Sorry, what?
Zeros are still zeros.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, somebody that has a residence that's worth $3,000 is going to hurt just as bad as somebody that has a residence worth $30,000.
Oh, okay, so you're saying it's all relative based on your income and what you're facing. I think I understand.
Okay, well, like, so I would just say that, yeah, like, they are already paying a outsized portion relative to the average homeowner. And, yeah, yeah, I'll leave it at that, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Okay, but with, you say that the businesses have, like, priority for snow removal, but it's, again, non-residential, I'll go with you, like, because industrial, they don't have priority for snow removal. Right.
To and from, yeah.
But-
Not them, you mean their parking lots?
No, I mean, in the industrial area doesn't have a priority, just downtown, right?
Mr. Thackeray.
If I may, the streets policy is changing, and there will be some, there'll be some new routes, and we're simplifying the routes, so there will be some priority routes around our key infrastructure, for example, down at the wastewater
Industrial area?
treatment plant. And in the industrial area, our own facility is down there. Excuse me, so any main arterials as well, so.
But like, and again, like some of the businesses downtown, those are the businesses, they're not the non-residential, right? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, it's still the non-residential.
That's being
Buildings are
taxed, right? But it's the,
Buildings are being taxed, yes.
Yes,
Which
but
is
it-
where the snow removal is.
but it wouldn't affect them regardless. If they're just the owner of the building, they're getting an income, right?
Right.
It wouldn't matter what the businesses take in, because they can function with the snow removal. I'm just saying, like, we should really be careful with the businesses, non-residential thing and who gets benefits over what. I think it is pretty steep, like 51, it's high for me. I look at Airdrie, it's a very booming city, right? There's a whole bunch of new developments, like they're growing at a faster rate than what we are, businesses, people-wise, and everything else. So like the 94, when you're putting that into the average, I think it's high, in my opinion.
Mr. Thackeray?
I guess if I may, this is why we just want to start it, and this at least gives you something to work towards and say, okay, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, and it gives you a chance to see it in action and say, then look at some more data next year and say, are you comfortable, are you not comfortable, and then you've got some actual empirical data to make a decision. But I won't say every business makes a decision on it, but a lot of businesses, Canadian Tire's Co-op, they don't make their business on whether they're locating in a community based on the non-residential property tax. They make it based on a good business decision, and that's why they're here. They don't make or break based on their property taxes. I know that for a fact because I've worked with Canadian Tire Real Estate on a couple of projects. It doesn't factor into the business.
So I think if we can come back to this document, it's a thing that we're trying to approve as a driving philosophy as we go forward over the next 5 years. And I think if we can wrap our heads around the fact that it's a living document, that we can make adjustments to it, then the discussion has been really good tonight. I think it's made us all think about things. But I think if we can accept the fact that we can adjust this and come back to it in time, as long as we keep in our minds to this this length of time that we're trying to get non-residential to be closer to that 50%, and we can be cognizant of that and how it impacts business, I think that this could be okay.
That's exactly right, Your Worship, and certainly, you know, if the economy really tanks, then council is in a good position to make some real changes. If the economy starts booming, council again is in a position to make some changes, up or down.
Councillor Montgomery.
I'll just add one more thing. This just popped into my head, and that is that there are some businesses in town, you know, I'll use like, say, Walmart or, you know, one of those businesses located in that kind of area. They actually don't even get any street cleaning or snow cleaning because we don't go in there. That's private.
Private property. So if I could read,
Sorry, but Jason, they do. They get to and from. They just don't get their actual parking lot.
okay, so the roadway coming out, you're
The
saying?
roadway to
talking
get
about-
into
you're talking
there
about like the
on both
George-
sides
George
gets
Freeman.
plowed. And so does the other one, going in by the Days Inn.
Right, but that's not specific for that business, though.
But it gets people to their business.
All right, so if we can come back to this idea that if we do approve this, if we accept this, it is a working document, it's a living document, we can come back to it, we can adjust it, and it doesn't necessarily mean that all these things are going to happen immediately. So if that is good, are there any other questions regarding the document? And then we'd be looking for a recommendation or a motion to accept this report.
Sorry,
Councillor Cox.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
How do we do the motion when there's two options?
We're coming to that
Oh,
after.
we're not.
This is just the, whether or not we accept this as the long-term financial plan. And then we'll come to the,
Correct, if council wants to adopt
okay.
this plan.
Councillor
council
Bauer.
may move a motion.
Your worship, I move that council accept the 2018 long-term financial plan and adopt the recommendations within the 2018 long-term financial plan.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Teedy, for all your work on this and your staff for doing all this work and effort on it and being indulgent in all our questions, concerns, and worries. It's reassuring, though, that it is a living document, so I hope the public will realize that as well. Which brings us on to our next point. Do you stay with us, Mel? We are at the 7.2, 2018 operating and capital budget on page 33. If you're reading along at home, maybe you don't have this, but Director of Corporate Services again. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Teedy.
Good evening. Thank you, Your Worship. The 2018 budget has been a challenge in terms of arriving at a budget that will move the town in the direction outlined in the long-term financial plan and yet not be a great burden on the ratepayers within the town. Over the last 2 or 3 years in particular, the town has utilized reserves and has had a growth in assessment to fund cost increases in operations along with the utilization of reserves. The property assessment growth included in the 2018 budget is 0.5% increase. This is not sufficient to fund increases in program growth or inflationary growth. Also included in the budget is utilization of reserves of $826,000 to balance the budget. Having said that, the options that we have in front of us this evening, option B a 4.9% residential tax adjustment, and a 5.9% non-residential adjustment. And option E, a 4.9% residential tax adjustment and a 6.9% residential adjustment. The budget summaries for each option is attached in your materials. Another recommendation is that council authorize an amount of either $117,900 or $142,659 be transferred to the Infrastructure Reinvestment Reserve from the unallocated surplus. Council in 2016 authorized the creation of the Infrastructure Reinvestment Reserve and authorized the transfer of $107,000 to that reserve as an initial and first investment in the Infrastructure Reinvestment Reserve. The town of Strathmore remains in a good financial position and at December 31st, 2016 had an unrestricted surplus of over $5 million in operating reserves and a restricted surplus of $6 million for specific future capital projects for total reserves of just over $11 million. The property tax mill rate in Strathmore for the years 2014, 15, 16, and 17 have all been at a lower rate than the 2013 tax rate. The average homeowner in Strathmore paid $2,439 in taxes in this 2017 year compared to $2,529 in 2013, a reduction of $90 or 3.7%. During the time period from 2013 to 2017, the town has continued to supply and expand the level of services expected by the residents of the town. Statistics Canada reports that for the Calgary region, the CPI has increased by 3.5% for the time period 2014 to 2017. Specific costs for the town has continued to increase over that same period of time. So in effect, residents have received a benefit of the reduction of 3.7% plus the cost of inflation of 3.5%, or a total of 7.2%. If we had mirrored the CPI. One example of the cost increase is the RCMP contract that the town has with the federal government. The projected cost for the RCMP contract in 2018 is $1.9 million. That forms 11.2% of the total tax revenue. The FCSS program and Youth Club program have both been enhanced in terms of services and staffing over the last number of years. In the 2018 year, the operations of the regional field house will commence at a projected net cost to the town of $207,000. After partnership contributions, this will be approximately 2% of the net municipal taxes. The 2017 residential property taxes for an average resident assessed at $300,000 was $2,439, and the non-residential mill rate is 10.183 compared to the residential mill rate at 8.130. The average residents assessed at $300,000 in our surrounding community is $2,444 in taxes compared to the $2,439. Strathmore non-residential rate of 10.183 is 16% below the surrounding average non-residential mill rate. Airdrie is at 11.68%, a mill rate of 11.68. Cochrane, 9.86. Okotoks, 11.199. High River, 11.346. Brooks, 16.294. The average is 12.076, and the median is 13.077. For comparative purposes, I've also included the large Alberta cities. So Calgary, the mill rate is 17.745 for the non-residential mill rate. Edmonton, 20.759. Red Deer, 17.212. Lethbridge, 22.807. The average is 19.631. The median is 20.009. The total of the 2018 operating budget is $39 million, including debt, principal repayment, and amortization. Of this amount, $17,159,000 will come from property taxation using the option B. This is an increase of $859,000 over the 2017 actual property taxes. A 3.5% increase for education requisition has been included in the 2018 budget. The actual amount of requisition that we will get from the province will vary either up or down, and the taxes will also accordingly vary up or down, depending on what we get from the province. But we think it'll be in that 3 to 4% range. The budget reflects estimated revenue and expenditures for operational and capital requirements for 2018. The amount of taxation is an integral part of the budget and really of the long-term financial plan.
Thank you, Mr. Teedy. Are there any questions or comments from council? I have a couple that I wanted to ask, and one might be to provide background or context too. And the question would be, you show our taxes, our property taxes, residential going down, a reduction of $90 or 3.7%. From 2013 to 2017. Would you be able to offer an explanation of how it came to be that our property taxes actually decreased in the last 4 years for residential?
Part of the decrease had to do with the province reducing the overall education tax in the 2014 and 2015 year compared to the 2013 year.
Okay, so if we choose an option, well, when we choose an option tonight, it could be impacted by what the province does as well as far as...
If it is greater than 3.5% or less than 3.5%, it could be larger
Right.
or lower.
Okay, and the other thing I wanted to talk about or ask about is when we're trying to provide services for town residents like infrastructure, snow removal, all those types of services like the FCSS program, youth club, the regional field house, the new operations. The town only has certain streams where we can get revenue from. That's correct. Like,
Yes, absolutely.
so I was just thinking in terms of, we have utility rates that we can look at. We obviously have property taxes that we're looking at tonight. We have franchise fees, and then we have the MSI funding. But as Mr. Thackeray was stating earlier, we may face a decrease or an actual cut to the MSI funding.
The agreement expires after the 2019 year.
Right, and
Or-
that's one of the
or in
reasons in your
2019.
long-term plan, we're trying to get away from relying too heavily on the MSI funding.
That's correct.
So my questions and comments were mainly for the public, for the media, that in order for the town to move forward and progress, we only have certain streams of revenue we can use. And unfortunately for all of us, property taxes is one of the revenue streams. My other question is, would you be able to explain how it is that Airdrie has its property taxes for residents so low? And now that's tied obviously into their non-residential taxes being quite high.
Yes, it is.
Is there an explanation as to how Airdrie is able to operate in such a fashion where their non-residential is so much higher than their residential? As a comparison.
Well, Airdrie is just one example, but if you look at Lethbridge, Red Deer, Edmonton, Calgary, their non-residential mill rates are significantly higher than their residential mill rates. Quite often, it's 2 to 1. Their residential mill rate will be perhaps 1/3 or 50% of the non-residential mill rate.
Okay, thank you. So,
And in those areas also, their assessed values are significantly higher than an area like Strathmore. Your assessed values in the city on a per acre basis could be significantly higher than Calgary, or per residential lot also would be higher in Calgary
okay,
than Strathmore.
thank you. And again, to reassure the vast numbers of people who are here at council tonight and the public in general, it may feel like we're going through this quickly, but my fellow councilors and I and administration and staff have worked for hours trying to put together what we think are the best scenarios to choose from tonight. So we've narrowed it down after many hours to 2 options we feel are the most feasible going forward. And that's what we're here to do tonight, is to decide which of the budget options we think are the best moving forward. Councillor Bauer, did you have a comment or a question?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say for the people at home and the people who are here tonight, this has been an arduous process for all of us, and it certainly increased my learning curve in ways that I didn't even know I had the capacity to do. I am very disappointed in the fact that this council is being put in the position of having to have option B or E and see such increases in taxation, and that these increases were not brought forward consistently prior to our term. It's put me in a very difficult position in terms of having to explain to my constituents why we're having the increase now. And I understand that you have been using reserves to kind of, close that gap and whatnot. But I don't think that we're doing anything that we shouldn't, because looking at Strathmore, we have a fantastic town full of so many good public services. And if we are going to continue adding arenas and recreation facilities and things that are going to bring people here. We need to have a reserve, and we need to be able to fund these things. I don't essentially have a question. It's more just a comment that we have spent lots of time, thank you, Air Fuel, for pointing that out, and this is not to be taken lightly. We have all, or myself included, spent hours thinking about this, and so I thank you for your time again, Mel, in doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Are there any other comments? We'll be looking for a motion to come forward that can then be discussed and voted on. Councillor Montgomery.
I will move that council approve the operating and capital budget for the 2018 year with a residential adjustment of an increase of 4.9% and a non-residential increase of 5.9%.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. You've heard the motion. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Should I include the second part in there as well,
Second part of that motion, I guess, would be,
with regards to the reserve? Do you want
I
that as
think
part
that's
of one
part of it.
motion?
Is it, I'm not sure I understood the second part of the motion.
Well, it
You've
says,
made-
and that council authorize an amount of, and then in this case, it'd be 117,900 to be transferred to the infrastructure reinvestment reserve from the,
If I may, I'd suggest as a second motion.
okay, okay. So we'll
so
go with the
we've,
original.
thank you, Councillor Montgomery, for the clarification. You've heard the motion coming forward about the two options regarding the capital budget for 2018. There's no other discussion. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? So we're at 2-2, so the motion is defeated. But there's 5 of us.
3-2.
3-2. Sorry, I missed that count. Who was the, sorry, if I could just get clarification, what was the third, there were 3 in favor of the motion?
3 were opposed.
3 were opposed. Okay, so the motion is defeated. Then we'll be looking for an alternate motion.
Your worship, I move that council approve the operating and capital budget for the 2018 year with the following option E: 4.9% residential, 6.9% non-residential, and that I'm doing that as separate too.
Okay, so we've heard that option, and we've heard that motion come forward. Is there any discussion on this? Councillor Bauer, did you have a comment?
Yes, it's really important that people know that commercial services in this town are very integral to our subsistence and our growth going forward. The reason that I believe 6.9% is a better number than 5.9 is because the gap is so tiny. And I really think that because we have not had any increases in 5 years, that it's timely and we are not being in any way, well, I just think that this is the time to do this and go forward and adopt the 6.9%.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Councillor Montgomery.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think this is a difficult process, and as Councillor Bauer and I have said, we've labored over this for many hours. It's a very tough decision to go forward. Mr. Thackeray, did you want to add anything?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. I was kind of hoping you would. You would add something. So are there any other discussion points? I guess the only thing I would add is, I realize it's on an average here, it looks like a $31 increase. Isn't much, but I am concerned about the climate we're creating for our non-residential and in essence, our commercial taxes. So can you just remind us Was there not a commercial tax increase in budget 2017?
Yes, there was.
Do you remember what the non-residential increase was last year?
It was 1% for residential and 2% for non-residential.
Okay.
But growth from the town and assessment growth largely offset that, so effectively there was very little. It was less than the 1% and 2%.
And again, coming back to that point, if we do have growth this year, if growth is spurred, it could impact this percentage that we decide upon tonight.
It would have to happen real quick.
Yeah, that's what yeah. Okay.
If I
Are Mr. Thackeray?
There was one thing, as part of our financial plan, we've recommended that new programs and services, net new programs and facilities are funded with new revenues. And a decision was made that we're respecting was to build a new field house, and that will take dollars to operate it, even with generating revenues, and that's still, I think that's probably 3 or 4%.
We included $207,000 net,
Yeah,
and so that equates to approximately a 2%
yeah.
tax increase as a result of the field house opening in 2018.
But that's just in 2018, and in 2019, we'll have a full operating year. We hope to see revenues, but it costs real money to service. It costs money just to service the debt on that of, I think, 1 or 2 points on the taxes to deal with the debt servicing. So the town has traditionally found other sources of revenue for projects, but we believe that those days are over. If the town wants to keep adding, rebuilding, investing in its existing infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. My only other question would be a procedural one to administration, and that is, depending on the vote, if neither option is chosen, what are we left at? Because we do have to have some sort of budget moving forward in the new year.
We would request council adopt the budget. We do require that. We do require some budget to be adopted. And the actual tax rates bylaw is not adopted by council until late in the winter, early spring. So that's when the actual technical part of that goes through.
Okay, so in essence, we're looking at the vote then, if there's no further discussion. And this motion that's on the table would be to remind everyone, it would be a 4.9% residential increase, 6.9% non-residential increase. Everyone's heard the motion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is defeated. Oh, it did? Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting me. Thank you. And then we're looking for a second motion.
Your worship,
Councillor Cox.
I move that council authorize the amount of $142,699 to be transferred to the infrastructure reinvestment reserve from the unallocated surplus.
You've heard the motion. Councillor Montgomery.
Could I offer a friendly amendment, just to match the number in the column on the right there?
Okay, so the correct amount then would be 142,659. And then I would just have a procedural question that since the option E was chosen, then basically, as far as councillors are concerned, this is almost a moot point as far as the amount going there, unless you want to set a lower amount. Do you understand what I'm saying, Mr. Thackeray?
if I may, if the amount that council desires, which is as proposed, aligns with the recommendation.
Okay.
That's within your discretion.
Thank you for that
That's
clarification.
And that's acceptable.
Okay, so you've all heard the motion, no further discussion. All in favor of that second motion? Opposed? And the motion is carried. And that brings us to item 8, committee reports. 8.1, reports from councilors from committees on which they sit. Are there any council committee reports, council reports? Okay. Item 9, items directly related to council. We have a notice of motion 9.
Sorry, what was it, 7.3?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. 7.2 has been, 7.3, right, it's written down there. 7.3 is council remuneration and expense policy. Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. And that's legislative services, but Ms. Sawatsky's not here tonight.
It just says that administration will be bringing a draft policy on January 10th.
Yes, as per, we'll bring it for policy in January.
So are you looking then just for a motion to accept this as information? Or is it just information?
It's just information. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll bring it forward, and if council's agreeable to the 10th, we'll bring it forward on the 10th, I believe. is the-
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yes, thank you.
So that does actually bring us to 9.1. We have a notice of motion coming forward regarding downtown parking on page 39. Deborah, are you reading the notice of motion?
On the downtown parking?
Mm-hmm.
Can you just summarize?
Should be on page 41. The actual motion.
Okay, it's from Councillor Sobel, and it's whereas the town of Strathmore held a downtown seminar within the downtown business owners, and whereas there continues to be a concern from Strathmore business owners that the 2-hour parking restriction negatively affects shoppers from completing their activities in the downtown area. Now therefore it be resolved that council extend the parking limit for downtown from 2 to 3 hours.
So then this will just be an item that's being brought forward to us at the next meeting in
That's
January?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Council would decide to resolve on that meeting on the 10th.
Okay, thank you. So number 10, bylaws. We have 10.1, bylaw number 17-18, council procedural bylaw amendment bylaw.
That's correct. Administration is bringing forward this amendment to the procedural bylaw to establish the Recreational Facility Development Committee and set the terms for the committee and to make changes to the Sustainability Committee terms of reference to increase the membership from 5 to 7 members. And administration is recommending that council give all 3 readings to amend this bylaw this evening.
Thank you, and if everyone in council understands that, we're just trying to push forward this idea that the terms of reference are accepted and the committee can begin to work. So I'd be looking for motions concerning bylaw 17-18. Councillor Bauer?
I move that council give first reading to bylaw 17-18, council procedural bylaw amendment bylaw.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Councillor Cox?
I just, look, when I see I know did we go from 11 to 7? Is that what happened here?
It's from 5 to 7.
Okay. 1 member at large, so only 1 member from the community can be on the committee? I think,
For the Sustainability Committee, there are currently 5 public members.
There we go.
no, this is the recreation facility master plan.
This covers both of those committees.
It's both, yeah.
So how come it says 1 member at large?
Well, no, that's, if you look farther down, it has the sustainability committee, that's what she's talking about, is the sustainability. So you
Yeah.
guys are talking
Yeah.
about the 2 different committees.
But yes, the
On
master
the, on the
plan
same
one.
bylaw.
So this is
Oh, okay.
page 47 of the agenda.
43? Oh,
The Recreation Plan Committee has
One member at large.
Yes, and it has specific members from other groups. We don't recommend going much bigger than that because it makes it more complicated, but the committee can ask for information, input, and so forth.
And this is just for like a recreation master plan. It's not for a specific project. I think if we were gonna do, say, like a marine, I think we could branch off of this.
That was the intention, you could have
Yeah.
a specific,
Yeah.
we want to build such and such
Yeah.
ice, whatever. That was the intention of it. But I think this will gather the information that will be needed to make those decisions.
Okay, sorry, I have another question.
Okay, I think, just a point of order, are we not supposed to bring the motion for second reading before we do discussion and questions on it?
My apologies.
So we're looking for a motion for second reading, and then we can do that. Councillor Cox.
Sorry, I move that council give second reading to bylaw 1718, council procedural bylaw amendment bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Now, are there any questions about that? Councillor Cox.
Sorry, what are the requirements for this one member at large? Do they apply for that position? Isn't it applied?
Typically, we do a call, and they would do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox and Mr. Thackeray. So you've heard the motion on the floor. All in favor? And now we'll be looking for another motion. Councillor Corbeil.
Move that council give a third reading to bylaw 17
Oh, I think you just want to do the one just above.
Robert, that council give
Yeah.
unanimous consent to third reading to bylaw 16 to 18, council procedural bylaw amendment bylaw.
And I think we just want to make sure in that third reading, it has it labeled as 1618 instead of 1718. We want to make sure that's correct. Thanks. So you've heard that motion for unanimous consent for third reading. All in favor? And Councillor Bauer.
I move that council give third reading to bylaw 17-18, council procedural bylaw amendment bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Brings us to items 10.2, bylaw number 17-19, fees bylaw amendment bylaw, page 49. And this is, again, legislative services.
Thank you. Every year, council reviews the fees that the town charges for different services in conjunction with adopting the following year's budget. Administration is bringing forward changes to numerous schedules in the amending bylaw for council's approval. Should you wish, each department can speak to each of the changes proposed. I think there's a couple of them here. And administration is recommending that council do give all three readings to the amending bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
I move that council give first reading to bylaw 1719, fees bylaw amendment bylaw.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried.
I have a question.
If you can do second reading, we can do that.
Okay. I move that council give second reading to bylaw 17-18, fees bylaw amendment bylaw. 17-19.
Thank you. Now we've got the second motion for second reading on the bylaw. We can have discussion or questions.
Your Worship, I'm not sure if anybody else has this question, but the items in red, are those new development permits? And the items in black, are those existing? Or is it the red ones have been changed and are new amounts, and that the black ones are current?
Your Worship, I can probably answer that best.
Thank you.
So anything in red in the planning and development section is changed. So those instances where, for example, accessory buildings is in black and then the numbering is in red, in those instances, the fee changed. For things such as some of the enforcement stuff, development permit extension requested by applicant or owner where it's all in red, that's a new fee that hadn't previously been charged.
So there seems to be quite a lot of fees that were approving to be new fees. What was the administration's thought process that went into putting these new fees in place?
With regards to that, Your Worship, and I'll build off of what Mel spoke of today, is this notion of moving more towards a user pay model. Specifically with a lot of the, well, first up, the obvious ones. The town used to contract out engineering, a lot of the engineering services. So when we'd hire an engineer to do, for example, a stormwater review as part of a development, the town would simply pass that cost on to the applicant. A few years ago, the town hired a development engineer to do those reviews in-house, but stopped charging the fees associated with that. So that became a pure money-losing proposition. So for example, some of the charges there, development agreement preparation, stormwater management review, subdivision agreement preparation, are intended to capture some of the time that the development engineer is putting into reviewing these files. These used to be farmed out to that third party, and we'd just pass that on to the applicant. Now, those are being sort of done as separate fees. As well, we looked at some of the items that took an heroic amount of of staff time. So things like bylaw enforcement, things like dealing with folks who start building before having a permit in place, or some of the applicants who apply for a permit, let it drag, let it lapse, come in for an extension. All of those things take staff time. So some of these fees are intended to reflect that. Most of the new fees won't be charged to quote unquote regular developers, but instead to folks who've let permits lapse, who get started without applications, or some of the guys doing the more complicated things, subdivisions and the like, where we're spending a lot of time on stormwater.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Bauer?
Yes, it is. Thank
Okay. Councillor Montgomery?
Councillor Cox.
Oh,
would like to
Councillor
go first.
Cox,
I have a
sorry.
list, so.
Okay.
I just have a quick question. Thank you, Ryan. The numbers that are in red, assume, of course, that they're being changed, but you don't tell us what they were before. So,
Your Worship,
like, are they being increased by, like, $100? Are they being increased? Like, I just want to know, are we being...
Your Worship, yeah, unfortunately, we didn't include that information here. So some of the larger changes, we can just sort of hit on those. Probably the largest dollar change is for commercial, industrial, institutional permits, new development. So if someone's building a new commercial building, the base on that is going from $500 to $800. And that, with a lot of these, again, looking to move into a cost recovery mode and kind of getting there gradually. So some of the permits that take the longest time are the ones that go up the most. So that would be the commercial one going up by $300. Fees for some of the, what's another larger one? The permanent signs, that's one that we discussed, especially in terms of digital signs. That one's doubling, going from 150 to 300. Those are probably the biggest percentage changes.
If I may,
Mr.
Your Worship,
Thackeray.
Ryan, all of these changes are consistent with the Development Services report that this council and the past council did review, and they're all aligned with those directions and changes in the fee structure. So we have a more cost recovery model for the service fees, because we were losing money left, right, and center. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thackeray. Does that work? Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you, Worship. So my first question has to do with Schedule B, and that is, what is a building contractor? This might sound kind of dumb, but what is a building contractor / subtrade, and why are they being charged $750 for a business license?
Your Worship, so that's, that one there is not a new fee. That one we've always done, and we didn't amend it in this instance. However, what that is if a building contractor comes to town, applies for a business license, rather than have him or her have all their sub-trades apply for separate business licenses, this is intended to capture that all. So rather, it's sort of a convenience fee that was introduced a few years back, where rather than having, the builder apply for his or her business license, then the electrician they're bringing from out of town apply for a separate one, the framer apply for a separate one. It's intended to capture everyone under that one $750.
But so like a building contractor within the town, do they pay $750?
Your worship, in that instance, if it's someone located inside of the town who wasn't bringing in sub-trades, we'd direct them to a cheaper license. It would just be where it's someone who's going to be bringing in a number of sub-trades. This is sort of a convenience fee or a convenient, a way to get around sort of almost double dipping on some of the subs on those.
So like, would this apply to like, say, like a drywall taper or something like that?
Your worship, if the drywall, again, if it were just sort of John wanting to start a drywall business in Strathmore, it wouldn't. If John were bringing in a number of subs, well, I don't think a drywaller would bring in subs, but if it were a contractor bringing in a number of subs, then it would apply, yeah.
Is there like, is there an actual rule that somebody could look at to figure out where they would fall, or is it left up to whoever's at the desk that day?
Your worship, that's one there that we'd, generally, it would sort of, the front counter staff would discuss that with the applicant and sort of say, okay, you're coming to town to build a house, or you're a contractor in town building a house. You're gonna have X number of sub-trades. Probably makes more sense for you to pay the whole $750, and then that way all the sub-trades aren't having to get separate licenses. Most of the local sub-trades, drywallers, framers, they're gonna have business licenses already. The guys who are an electrician doing a number of homes in Strathmore a year will most likely have their business license separate. This is intended more for where a contractor's bringing in a number of sub-trades, generally from outside of town.
Would it be possible to maybe have administration maybe make that some more specific and actually make up some actual like rules that somebody could look at so that they could definitively know ahead of time what their situation would be? And especially if it's more specific to out of town companies, I think it would be beneficial.
Your worship, absolutely, and I can look into to see if there's sort of an unwritten policy or how that's being applied, and we can bring that back to council.
I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Please. Okay, and my second question is just down that page where it says direct control application. Can you tell me what that means?
Your worship, absolutely. So a direct control bylaw is an instance where someone comes to town, we'll say a business for explanatory purposes, and wants to do something that doesn't fit in any box whatsoever. Absolutely fits in no boxes the town has. Let's, again, an amusement park, for example. In that instance there, town staff would traditionally look at the land use bylaw, say, this doesn't fit anywhere, sorry. The direct control mechanism allows a council to adopt sort of a site-specific zone. So rather than site-specific land use district. So rather than an R1 or a C1 type land use district, this would be a direct control zone, or land use district. It applies to a single property, and it allows a lot of specificity in terms of how it's written. So staff and council would put together a bylaw that would address how amusement parks are regulated. It would only apply to that one parcel. So the direct control bylaw, not often applied, especially when the community has a newer land use bylaw, but that's sort of where a DC bylaw would be used.
Okay, thank you. And so I guess on the next page of Schedule B, with regards to the home office permit cost, can you tell me how much that currently is?
Your worship, I'm just scrolling down on my, on the tablet here. So we'll grab that here. Your worship, that price is currently $100. So that's going up to $150.
And could you, I guess, maybe explain to me, when somebody, sets up a desk and a phone in their house, I guess, like, what value are we providing them, especially where we're increasing the fee by 50%?
Your worship, with regards to that, there isn't really a lot of process associated with that. It is largely sort of reviewing the application for compliance with zoning and issuing the permit. For a number of folks looking to get insurance or that sort of stuff, some of those folks do need that home office permit. So there's a value to them. Truth be told, I would suspect that most folks doing sort of the desk and phone operation probably don't come to don't come to town hall to look for that that development permit. But yeah, sort of the value there, in as much as there's value, is that it's an issued permit, sort of provides legitimacy to the business and gives them a paper trail that the town has blessed their business.
Okay, I can see the point about it's I guess capitalizing on their need if they need it for insurance purposes. I'm concerned that maybe we're scaring away some people from applying because it might be prohibitive for them. So I guess there's it's finding that balance. I think to be honest, 150 is a bit high for that. But I guess I'll leave that for now. My next question has to do with, on the next page, with regards to the signs. So like with a temporary sign, like that's not talking about like a sandwich board or something like that?
Your worship, with regards to something like that, probably not. This would be more for those magnet type signs or for the larger portable signs that sort of have a presence but aren't there permanently. Rather than the town doesn't really get into the business of regulating the really little sandwich board signs at this time.
Is it considered temporary, like if it's not fixed to the ground, so like one of those magnet signs, do you guys charge the $100 every time the sign is changed, or just for putting it there?
Your worship, with regards to that, the town would charge it sort of every time it's placed. It is a development permit, so every time there's that development, in that instance, the sign being placed somewhere, the town would be, the bylaw would direct the town to charge that.
Okay. And so I guess it might be beneficial, I guess, to have a rule, if the sign is, above this size, maybe a square meter, then, it's eligible for that, just so that we're not getting into the sandwich boards. And then my last question has to do with stormwater management review. And I guess the question is, under what circumstances will somebody need a stormwater management review?
Your worship, with regards to that, that's one of the new engineering fees. So that would be charged where generally it would be with a subdivision or a larger scale development, where they're really tying a lot of systems into, where they're tying into town storm systems, or where they're tying into some sort of storm pond. So again, a residential builder wouldn't be charged that. It would be more so, for example, someone doing a 24 lot subdivision where there's a review of the grading plan would end up being charged that.
Okay. All right, that's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. I just had a couple of questions, and then we can move on, I guess. The Schedule F, oh, sorry, I missed you again. I'm sorry, let's go to Councillor Corbeil. Why am I not seeing you?
I just had a couple comments, actually. For the NSF charge, I would have liked to have seen that increased a little bit. It's $30 right now, and I know some institutions charge like $45. Is it in credit union? You know, I don't want to lose money on something that, something like that, for sure. And then it says a $50, then in brackets, $58 charge will be applicable without further notice or any outstanding amount. Do you know which, is it $50 or is it 58? Not that that really matters, but,
Page 60
yeah, sorry.
or 10? Yep.
Underwater.
Mel, I may defer that one to you on the utilities, yeah.
Is it 58 or 50?
It should read 58. It
Okay.
was 50.
And then would we look at it ever increasing the NSF charge?
I think we had increased it from 25. I'm just
Okay.
going by memory. I thought it was 25, and I thought
Increased
I
to
did
30.
move it to 30.
Okay.
If council would like a higher fee, I would be,
Like I said, I just know some
agreeable.
institutions charge higher than that, so it's kind of crappy to lose money on, just like I said, something as little as an NSF check. And I want to clarify, like, some of our utilities and stuff are going up because our prices are going up, correct?
that is correct.
That's-
The
I just
cost
wanted
of
to-
water from the
Yes.
city is up 5.2%.
And that's why we're increasing ours. I was just clarifying.
That is part of the reason, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, and my apologies, Councillor Corbeil, I don't know what I've done. Just before you leave, Mel, can I
Yes.
check again on page 49 where the readings are talked about? It talks about Schedule F utilities, 100% increase for storm sewer rates. Is that because it was far too low before? How are-
Yes. We were losing an amount of money, and this is only to bring it up to a cost recovery basis, going
Okay.
from 370, I believe it was, to the 740.
Okay, thank you. And then if I could follow Councillor Corbeil's question about the NSF check fee, do we have a lot of NSF checks in a typical year?
We do have some.
Okay, so how do you feel about having that go up to $50?
I'd be fine with that.
Okay, and a procedural question then to administration. If we were to adjust that utility late payment fee from $30 to $50 as mentioned, how does that affect us regarding the second reading and going for unanimous third readings? Do we make an adjustment as far as amending that bylaw? Yeah, because it's coming forward for possibly 3 readings. And if we wanted to adjust one of the parts from $30 to $50, you do it at second, so you can make the amendment, and then your motion has to read that it's been amended, though. Okay. Okay, so what we'd need then is, at second reading, we need someone to make an amendment? We are at second reading right now.
If I may, if it is agreeable, then the amendment would be made at second reading, and then council may, if council agrees to the resolution to the amendment verbiage, then that would be adopted by council, and then council
Okay.
would move on to third and final.
So is everyone okay with, are we okay with having that amended to $50? And then we would reflect that, we would mention that in the motion,
As amended.
right?
So we have to do this second reading again?
I wouldn't mind.
No,
like,
it would be
you
as
guys are
amended.
agreeable, I would
Councillor Montgomery, sorry.
Sorry, if you guys are agreeable, I would like to consider at least modifying a couple of the other ones. Like I said, the home office, we could increase it a bit, but I don't see why a 50% increase is necessarily fair. And I mean, that's probably I would like to kind of deal with that $750 for the building contractor, but if we can't deal with that specifically now, but I think that should be kind of dealt with.
Ryan, did you have a comment about that?
Your worship, with regards to that, if council wishes to certainly even keep that home office permit at $100, it's not a vast sum of money. The town doesn't get a lot of those anyhow. With regards to that $750, that is a charge that the town has now. It's not being amended. We can certainly, as I say, we'll bring something to council to sort of provide some more clarity on how that's administered. And perhaps if council wishes, then we can move forward.
May I make a suggestion through the chair? If there's some concern or question about the validity of the 750, or there's a different way of doing it, another approach could be that because it's not being proposed any differently, council, if everybody agrees to add a quick item or an administrative inquiry, it could be a notice of motion could be brought forward, or it could be directed to bring back an amendment to the bylaw, so we could bring it back January 10th or the
So if I can
second
just,
meeting in January, if you wish to amend the bylaw, the fees bylaw of this one specific area, so we could address the specific area without stopping councils to address the bylaw, if you so choose.
so you're saying we could pass the bylaw as it is and then amend it at a later date?
Yes, because you're not amending, unless you intend on amending it, I would still recommend that if that's the intent, unless if you just want to pass a further amendment, if everybody's agreeable to that, we can do that, but.
Actually, like, so I will, I'm fine with, I'm fine with leaving, and I totally understand the charge, and I think it's not a bad idea. I think at some point in the future, we should try to just maybe clarify some of the language around it. But I think for now, like, just for clarity, we might as well I'll just leave it alone. But if we could modify that home office charge to leave it at $100, that'd be awesome.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for second reading to bylaw number 17-19 fees bylaw, amendment bylaw. All,
As amended? As amended?
yes, as amended.
As amended were the $50 NSF charge and remain the
Home
office at
office rent.
$100.
Yes. Thank you for that help. So you've heard that motion as amended. All in favor? Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Cox.
I move that council give third reading to bylaw 1719, fees bylaw.
Looking unanimous consent.
Oh, unanimous consent first? Sorry. I move that council give unanimous consent to read the third reading of bylaw 1719, fees bylaw, amended bylaw.
You've all heard the motion. All in favor? The motion is carried.
I will move that council give third reading to bylaw 17-19, fees bylaw, amendment bylaw as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. You've heard the motion. All in favor? The motion is carried unanimously. Which brings us to 10.3, bylaw number 17-17, land use bylaw, amendment bylaw. And that is infrastructure and development services. Ryan again.
Thank you, Your Worship. And you'll have to pardon me if I get excited. This is a planning issue, and I'm so excited to be bringing that to this to council. So, without belaboring it, and I think Mr. Proctor and Renee did a great job putting the report together. The developer for Wildflower Ranch is sort of moving along in their phasing plan, and has submitted a subdivision application and a land use bylaw amendment application to facilitate moving forward with their next phase of subdivision, which would be 24 lots and one municipal reserve lot. So the first step in this is the land use bylaw amendment to go from, right now the properties are designated agricultural, That's sort of a holding designation in Strathmore. And so going from that agricultural through to R1N, single detached residential, the narrow lot single detached residential. As well as a small portion P1, our public service district. So that's the municipal reserve lot. So this application is consistent with the area structure plan that was adopted in 2010, and then that was mirrored in the 2014 municipal development plan. So just because this is for a number of councillors, this will be the first sort of land use redesignation bylaw. I'll talk a little bit about that. So one of the changes that the province has made is requiring that land use bylaw amendments be done in compliance with the municipal development plan. So the municipal development plan, the MDP, is sort of that high-level visionary document for the town, the future land use. So it has a number of general growth principles and then designates every property in Strathmore with a future growth or a future land use. And then the intent, and the province has clarified that in legislation finally, is that the land use bylaw sort of creep towards meeting the vision in the municipal development plan. So in this instance here, there is the area structure plan, which sort of plotted out how Wildflower Ranch would look. Then council adopted that new municipal development plan, which designated these properties for future residential. And then this application then would move the properties currently with the land use designation, what I keep calling zoning, designation of agriculture to R1N residential. So that's sort of all consistent with the plans. And this is a good example of how the process is supposed to work with the high-level vision, the detailed plan, the area structure plan, and now we're moving along with phasing. So if council decides to give this bylaw first reading, the other difference between a land use bylaw and all the other non-land use bylaws, which are not as exciting, is that with a land use bylaw amendment, there's the requirement for a public hearing. So council would give this bylaw first reading, and then rather than doing second and third reading tonight, instead a public hearing would be scheduled for January 10th, at which point members of the public would come, it would be advertised, they would offer their opinion, concerns, support, whatnot, after which point council could consider that and grant the bylaw second and third reading or defeat it then. So that's sort of why this is structured a little bit different than all of the other bylaws. So with regards to this, because it is consistent with all the plans, and as well just because it does start to give a little bit more inventory on that end of town, staff are recommending that council grant first reading to the bylaw, and that council schedule that public hearing for January 10th, 2018. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
I move that council give first reading to bylaw 17-17 and that council hold a public hearing on this bylaw on January 10th. Can I do it all in one? Two?
Do you need two separate motions?
Okay, never mind then.
So
I'll just
you've-
do the council give first reading on bylaw number 17.
Thank you. You've heard the motion from Councillor Corbeil. All in favor? Motion is carried. And we're looking for a second motion. Councillor Bauer.
I move that council hold a public hearing for bylaw 17-17 on January 10th, 2018.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you, Ryan, for all your work. And item 11, urgent business. I don't believe we have anything. Item 12, are there any questions between councillors or councillor statements? Council statements? Councillor Bauer? Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay. Number 13, administrative inquiries. Deborah from Legislative Services.
Thank you. We have 5 administrative inquiries tonight. The first one is from Mayor Fuel. He's wondering if administration can come to council with a report detailing the pros and cons of city status. The next 3 are from Councillor Peterson. She asks if administration would assist council in drafting a letter of support for the Wheatland Dialysis Society. Her second one is what steps must council undertake to develop an AUMA 2018 proposed resolution in support of dialysis patients? And the third one is would our Department of Planning and Development meet with business owner Grace, I apologize, Shoughton of Assist Business Center to discuss her ideas relevant to business incubators? And the fifth one is from Councillor Montgomery. And he's asking about the snow removal policy. Are we obligated by other levels of government to use the current system that we have now? Also, are we obligated, when we use this particular system, he's wondering if we are sacrificing efficient management of the snow in favor of sticking to a policy that creates inefficiencies by the nature of demanding that our snow management crew target somewhat disparate areas regardless of what could be accomplished in those areas. He would like to see a more efficient and effective use of man-hours if the snow management was done by preset routes that are not totally bound by sticking to the current priority sequence system we have now. And asked if we could construct a series of routes that depend on snowfall situation, the ongoing event versus snowfall that is ended, and that loosely respect the priority levels we have now. So we might make better use of the resources that we have at our disposal.
If I may.
Mr.
Your worship,
Thackeray?
If I may, that it's very good feedback, and if we'd like to, if Councillor Montgomery is agreeable, we'd like to answer the questions in the context of the proposed streets policy that's coming back to council. So I think it's good information. Is that agreeable to you? Because I believe a lot of it fits in with what's some of what's being proposed, some not.
Yeah, like what my concern is that like I don't want to unnecessarily, I guess, tie the hands of the town operations, and so if I guess the point is if there is a more efficient way that could be done, but is not able to be done at this point due to the restrictions placed by the current policy. I guess I just want to make sure that we're out of the way as much as possible so that this can be handled as efficiently as possible.
I believe if I may, what you're saying, you're looking for us to really put forward the most efficient and effective policy that's within our financial capability and not have it such that we're doing things inefficiently just based on past practices or what?
Well, yeah, so like basically, yeah, so I want to make sure that, yeah, you guys are not feeling like, you have to, let's say, follow one of our, like, I know in the old policy it had, a mention of like the composition of the pickle mix, which obviously I think is too specific. So I guess my question would be, is there a way that council can modify our current policy or bylaw in order to make things easier for you?
Yes.
Okay.
I think I'm understanding it. So it keeps strictly operational issues and efficiencies separate from other constituent or political issues. It keeps it effective, efficient, policy-based, rather than, as you said, the policy ought not to, in your opinion, to dictate what a pickle mix ought to be. That's an operational decision. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I want to make sure we're kind of facilitating your ability to do this effectively and efficiently.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and if I could ask a procedural question, as far as these various, Trent, did you have a question?
I just wanted to, if I may share with
Yes,
council,
come forward.
from personal experience, within policy was what you did though mean, right? Because you can be effective and efficient, but you have to be driven by a policy that is approved or you won't stand up in court when a discovery occurs because of something that you didn't follow or didn't do.
Right.
You have an exposure there. So you still always have to work off of an approved policy and be able to demonstrate that you have worked from that policy in doing any of your activities, but in this particular case, snow clearing. And I speak from experience from this.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Trent. Yeah, just to be clear, yeah, I want to make sure that we are, covering our, covering our backsides, but at the same time, facilitating things to make it easier for you guys, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. And my procedural question is, do we need to accept those administrative inquiries as information, or do we just have them mentioned and you guys are going to be dealing with them? They'll come back to us?
They'll come back.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to a motion to go in camera, and the motion needs to mention the FOIP section that it deals with. Councillor Cox.
I so move that council go in camera pertaining to pertaining to FOIP section 19, a personal matter.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion to go in camera. All in favor? And we're going into camera at 9:30.